You're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport and streaming online at WPKN.org.
Reporting and supporting what matters. This is CT Examiner Weekly.
In an election year when many of Connecticut's incumbents are facing primaries, one upstart challenger is facing an uphill fight in her bid to wrest the Democratic nomination from Deputy Majority Leader Matt Lesser. I'm reporter LeMaster with that story.
NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's a term often thrown around in battles over housing and development, but some residents in Stamford are now pushing back. I'm reporter Obernauer with that story.
Connecticut residents pay some of the highest electric bills in the country. Governor Lamont is pitching a handful of ideas that he says will lower those costs. I'm Feeney, and I'll have the latest on that story.
School's out and travel is on the rise. I'm Robin Breeding with a look at some iconic out-of-town summer cultural events.
And I'm Greg Stroud, CT Examiner's Editor-in-Chief. Joining us today is our Associate Editor, Liana Tiexiera. This is a chance for us all to be in the studio, everyone here talking about their stories, looking at what's ahead in this edition of CT Examiner Weekly. Let's start out, Ali, with this election. This is something we've been talking about a lot, not just in Middletown, but across the state. So what's the story?
So Anita Saunders, who is the former head of the local NAACP in Middletown and a charter school advocate, has been vying to have a primary with Matt Lesser. Her primary petition was due on June 9th, and now some of her signatures are being called into question. So
this is a race. I mean, Matt Lesser isn't just any candidate, isn't just any incumbent. He's a pretty powerful guy there in Hartford.
Yes, he is the deputy majority leader. He's held the seat since 2018, and he also previously ran for the Secretary of the State.
And so why would why would a Democrat challenge a Democratic incumbent and a Democratic leader in the legislature?
So overall, it seems like there's this sort of anti-incumbency sort of feeling. He's held the seat for a while, but I would say the biggest issue, particularly in Middletown, is the idea of a charter school. Anita Saunders has been a big supporter of having a local charter school in Middletown, and Matt Lesser hasn't. And she's alleged that Matt Lesser has even taken steps to take away funding from this charter school that she believes could help students in an alliance district.
So it's one thing to actually get a charter school approved. It's another thing to get the state legislature to actually give it funding.
Right.
And in this case, Middletown passed, they approved a charter school, but they haven't been able to start it up because they haven't been able to get any money from the legislature. And Matt Lesser, legislative leader, has not brought that money home, if you will. And so that's maybe part of it.
Right. So there's some allegations from the charter school advocates that Matt Lesser actually helped take out funding in a budget. I believe it was in 2023. And now they are currently suing the State Board of Education in order to get that funding. It's been multiple years since their charter school has been approved.
You know, Ali, I'm wondering if this race is maybe a bellwether for other primary contests we might see in the Democratic Party. I mean, traditionally, the Democratic Party has generally been closely allied with teachers' unions, which by and large oppose charter schools. And yet much of the base of the Democratic Party, particularly in urban areas, minorities are largely supportive of charter schools. Are you hearing any feedback about that?
Yeah, I think charter schools are a very dicey topic. I think it's interesting that Anita Saunders, she was also the head of the local NAACP. I think in a lot of press conferences that you go to about charter schools, you kind of see it pitched as an option for minority students who maybe aren't getting the resources they need at their local public school. But again, there is that sort of pushback from, I think, the teachers union and I think kind of the establishment being like, oh, this could take away funding from our public schools.
So, Ali, it seems like charter schools are one of the big divides between these two candidates. Are there other areas where they have strong disagreement or where Saunders argues Lesser isn't doing enough?
That's a good question. I think From what I've been able to gather, it's primarily charter schools. I think there's also some anti-incumbency sort of ideas of, hey, maybe we need someone else in this seat. Matt Lester's held it for a long time, and I think she has different views about education than I would say the typical Democrat might in the state.
What would you say is Anita's biggest challenge going into this race? Is it name recognition? Is it getting her policy ideas across to people?
I think there's a couple of things. I think both those things were accurate. I think that Matt Lester has a known name. He's been in Middletown politics for a while. He's widely known. He's pretty high up in leadership in the Senate. And also, I think that from my understanding, I think Anita Fort Saunders is known very well in the Middletown area, but the 9th districts also has Newington, Wethersfield, Rocky Hill, and Cromwell. So I think that's also a battle for her and kind of getting her message out as well.
But as far as I know, I mean, the latest news is that Anita Fort Saunders is going to fall short, likely, in terms of right now she's had to collect a lot of signatures on petitions to get herself on the ballot for a primary. And those signatures have been called into question in the last few days.
Right. So there's been a lot of back and forth about the primary petition. A couple of weeks ago, Anita Fort Saunders' campaign called into question why Matt Lester's campaign was calling local registrars of voters asking for her primary petition before it's sent to the Secretary of State's office. Now that the primary petition has been sent to the Secretary of State's office, the Newington Register in particular, the Democratic registrar, she told me that she has filed a complaint with the SEEC, which is the State Elections Enforcement Commission, because there were about 10 signatures on the primary petition where people have come back and said, I didn't sign this petition. And at least 6 people have signed affidavits stating they didn't sign Anita Fort Saunders' petition.
So in another case on the federal level where we have a primary with John Larson, Congressman John Larson, we just the latest person to be able to get on the ballot is a woman named Ruth Fortune. And to do that, she submitted roughly double the number of signatures required. And she collected those in part with the expectation that some of these signatures were going to be thrown out. It's just sort of part of the process, but nevertheless, it's a contentious one. So in this case, we have, Allie, I mean, what are some of the claims of these 10 signatures?
So it's the registrar described, questioning some of the names because she knew some of them and was like, well, I wouldn't expect them maybe to sign this petition. So she called up the Democratic town committee chair, and then this family apparently adamantly denied signing it. And then she started calling up some people that worked in town hall that were named on the petition, and they also said that they didn't sign it. And there was also some dates of birth that were incorrect.
So, I mean, one thing I mean, a lot of candidates have been challengers have been contacting us and saying, look, the party they haven't let us speak. They've made it harder for us to get on the ballot. They've made it hard for us to challenge. It's not fair. So I think what we're seeing is parties don't naturally just give up power. And so in some ways, I've heard an excitement about these challengers, but on the other hand, the party is very wary, I guess, of people that just maybe they haven't even just put in the time.
Yeah, and I've even heard from multiple races across the state of people trying to primary that they don't even know where to start, that they aren't given even the resources or sort of the information to be able to primary.
So Allie, what's next? What are we expecting in this primary? When does this end? When will it be decided?
So as of recording, the Secretary of State's office has not stated whether Anita Fort Saunders has made the threshold to be on the primary ballot for August 11th. Also, there is a state elections enforcement complaint that could take potentially years to get to. So we'll see where that goes from there. So
Eric, in turning to your story, I think what we've seen is no issue pits party member against party member, Democrat against Democrat, like the issue of development. And no place maybe more than in Stamford, where we have a city that's really run and dominated by the Democratic Party, but that doesn't mean that they all get along.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Greg. And we saw in the last election in the fall in Stamford, the Democratic Party establishment, if you will, the city committee, pretty much stomped on a whole bunch of insurgent
they call them Reform Democrats.
Right. Yes, they do. And sometimes that's used complimentary. Sometimes it's pejorative. But anyway, the Democratic Party really, firmly reestablished control. And recently in Stamford, there's been a succession of issues that I wrote about. One of them involving the sale of a city-owned property. It used to be an auto service shop. And they're going to build 55 new apartments on that site. There's also a bus depot coming to another part of Stamford on Cortlandt Avenue, and there was a proposal to build a boat launch at one of the city parks. And after the votes, a long-serving member of the city's Board of Representatives, who's in with the establishment Democrats, more or less, he took to social media and kind of jabbed a thumb in the eye of the people who were dissenting against these projects, and basically threw around the term NIMBY, not in my backyard.
So this is all pretty small bore stuff. I mean, this is, a boat launch, a bus depot. But what we're talking about is just basically it's quality of life, I think, as I understand it. That's what the idea is, that we're not talking high politics. We're talking local politics.
Well, yes, that's true. Yes and no. But one thing that's really struck me when I first learned of this last fall during the mayoral campaign, it was said several times that the south end of Stamford has an average life expectancy 10 years less than the north end. And there are many who attribute this to poor air quality. There's accusations of environmental racism being thrown around. So it's not small bore to the people who are affected by these projects.
So in the case of Stamford, then NIMBY. I mean, we see NIMBY in other towns where the politics are often one of race, right? And this is the idea, is that housing and the failure to build housing is, say, in Old Lyme or in Stamford or in New Canaan, wealthy towns, that this is keeping out poor people. This is keeping out Black and Latino residents. But in Stamford, it's a little more complicated.
It is. Well, again, yeah, my answer is yes and no. I've mentioned before, I remember on election day in Norwalk, seeing at one of the polling places somebody holding a big sign saying basically no more apartments in Norwalk. And, affordable housing is one of those things. Pretty much everyone more or less agrees that, yes, we need more of it. But where is it going to go? And in Stamford, we see these battles playing out regularly. And the sale of one of the pieces of property I just mentioned, it was a former Midas shop in the downtown area of the city, is for affordable housing. And ironically, some of the people who supposedly you would think would be for this, who can't necessarily afford very expensive housing, are largely seen as the ones against it because they're concerned about how it's going to impact their neighborhood.
I think one of the questions is always, if we need housing, where does it go? And but in Stamford, it's also, what mayor, I like to ask, and I challenge sometimes the opponents of this development, what mayor in the state of Connecticut, or frankly any state, what big city mayor can say no, should say no to hundreds or thousands of wealthy residents actually wanting to move into a city? Isn't that part of how we solve the problems of our cities that have been abandoned, right, frankly, to the poor, if you will, to actually bring back a healthier demographic mix, to bring back people from the middle class and wealthier people into our cities?
Well, again, it comes back to the fact also, Greg, that what looks good on paper for a city's bottom line, more rateables, more taxes being generated and so forth, may not from the perspective of people impacted, is not always so good for them, because some people find themselves crowded out by the increasing cost of housing. And this has been another thing talked about in Stamford.
Yeah, I was curious about the cost of apartments down there and whether it's a sense of gentrification, whether the people who are actually hanging on by a thread who've lived there for a long time will be pushed to the outer edges because they won't be able to afford even the so-called affordable apartments. Just curious, the conversation.
And that's exactly what a particular member of the city's board of representatives said, that, when we speak of affordable housing, but affordable for whom? She said even some so-called, affordable housing really requires household income about $85,000 at least to afford it.
This is one of those questions where you see this disconnect sometimes that's at the heart of maybe some of these challenges. Who is this party serving? Who is the Democratic Party, or who is the Republican Party serving? And do they help just regular people? And on the one hand, you have this language of how can we, particularly you hear from the Democratic Party, how can we help regular people leave the cities, move to areas that have more wealth and maybe more opportunity? And on the other hand, you hear from a lot of residents in the cities, how can we stay in our neighborhoods? How can we not get gentrified out of our neighborhoods?
Well, it also comes down to a question of not only who is the party serving, but ultimately who is government serving, who is government for. In Stamford recently, prior to the sale of this property on Main Street for apartments, there was a public hearing scheduled, and not one person came up or showed up, or either online, virtually or in person, to speak at this public hearing. And a number of city officials said, well, this shows that since there's no voiced opposition, nobody really has a problem with it. But then, there are others who say, well, if you have people who feel disenfranchised, they're often not even going to show up to these hearings.
So what's next? So where do we go from here in this Stamford part of the story?
Well, there are going to be future hearings, certainly about the 55 apartments on Main Street downtown. And one of the representatives said, we need, not actually more than one, several, even those who are for the project agreed, we need to do a better job of meeting people where they are, possibly having public hearings in the neighborhood of the people who are impacted.
So it's one thing, of course, for housing to be affordable, but it's another thing for everything else. And I think that's what Luke's story is in part about. And we're hearing not just about that people have a hard time in Connecticut and elsewhere affording their rent, but how do you heat your apartment? How do you turn on the lights? And so Luke, that's been a pretty big story in a state with high energy prices.
You're exactly right. It's a state with some of the highest electric prices in a region with some of the highest electric prices in the country. Connecticut residents are paying around $200 a month on their electric bill. And so to combat this, Governor Lamont showed up in front of Eversource last week and issued several proposals, which he said could help lower those costs.
So can you outline those proposals? Or I think there was a big one that was it was particularly questioning the licensing, right? The questioning the place of some of these monopolies.
Yeah. I'll just let the governor speak for himself, because I thought he gave a really good quote about it. He said, quote, "I come out of the cable TV industry, and the right to operate a natural monopoly is not a right forever. Being able to have a monopoly use of the polls here is not just a natural right. I think it's a privilege, and I think you're going to earn that privilege, say, every 15 years.
So this is something we've actually heard on the federal level as well. This questioning of monopolies, or this questioning of licensing. We've heard this from the Trump administration aimed at media critics.
Yeah. I would say this is a little bit different. I think there is a level of personalness with the president that I think lacked here with Lamont. I don't think Lamont particularly cares for Eversource. At one point he said every time I talk with them, it ends with a lawsuit. But it seemed more like a professional frustration rather than a personal grievance, which I think sometimes can happen with the president.
And, frankly, it's an election year.
Yes.
So, and that's certainly what some of his critics said.
Yes. So He was criticized from the left and from the right on this. His Democratic primary challenger, Josh Elliott, called the plan incredibly weak, and he accused Lamont of basically being in corporate interests. Ryan Fazio, his Republican challenger, said more or less the same thing. He said the ideas lacked specifics and didn't amount to, quote, a substantive energy plan that will reduce rates for Connecticut residents, end quote.
I know one thing that we've been looking at is now that we've actually added in a reporter this summer in Washington, D.C., and one thing that we're looking at is the possibility of more natural gas supply to those electric generating plants in the state. And that's been an odd one, because normally for all these partisan divides, this seems to have sort of gained some support, not just from Lamont, but from President Trump and even Senator Chris Murphy, one of Trump's sort of most ardent opponents.
Yeah, and Eric and I were at the Republican convention in May, and that was something that was talked about by several of the speakers, was trying to get more natural gas in from New York. Betsy McCoy, Fazio's challenger for governor, one of her big promises in the campaign was, I'm going to sue Kathy Hochul and get more natural gas here.
I just wonder, though, Luke, if this is going to, if there's a tension, and at least what Governor Lamont and more broadly speaking, the Democratic Party are trying to advance, because typically the Democratic Party and its members typically oppose or at least resist things like pipelines. They're very much supportive of renewable energy. The fact of the matter is, renewable energy right now, when we're talking about grid scale renewable energy, really cannot exist on its own without the government as a silent partner in some way. And, these are, they're valid arguments for all of these things. But the point being that, there's cost to these things also. And I just wonder if there's a tension there. It's interesting to me that the governor is actually taking on this issue, though. That shows to me that he recognizes there's a need.
Well, and I will say, I do think there was some cynicism among media members at the press conference where he unveiled some of these proposals. I think one of the first questions that was asked was, some of these things are not new. Why is it taking you 8 years to bring some of these ideas up? I do think there is bipartisan frustration with the public utilities in this state. I don't think I heard criticisms from left of Lamont and right of Lamont saying those very things.
Part of me also has a little bit of a, you might say, a cynical reaction when I hear politicians, pounding Eversource of the utilities. Far be it from me to be, taking up the cause of the utilities. But again, the government imposes a lot of costs that also raise the cost of energy. It's very easy for them to just, engage in this sort of misdirection, say, look over there, don't look at us.
And well, this was something Fazio said, and again, he's running against Lamont, so he's going to try and draw as many distinctions between the two as possible. I understand that, but he did say that it's not just Eversource. Eversource is part of the problem, but he really blamed statewide policies as part of the reason that ratepayers are seeing these high rates.
So what's next for energy?
So it's worth noting these are all proposals, right? So I am sure some of these will be part of legislation in the next legislative session. I'm also sure that we're not going to stop hearing about energy anytime soon, because affordability has been one of the center issues this year, and energy costs, especially in the state, are a massive, massive concern for folks.
And I'll say one thing is that part of the way that we can understand what's happening in Connecticut is we look at how it's working out in our neighboring states, because Eversource just isn't providing power to Connecticut residents, it's providing power across New England. So if we want to understand what's happening right or wrong in Connecticut, we should probably try to figure out what's happening right or wrong in our neighboring states. And we'll certainly have more on that. We always wrap up the show with a look at the arts calendar. I think it's the best arts calendar in the state. And Robin Breeding, our arts editor, is in the studio. What do we have?
Well, I think my calendar this week is focused on getting out of Connecticut. So I'm looking at events for people who are going on vacation because kids are out of school, and there's many institutions that are in our whole region, including the Berkshires and upstate New York, Catskills area. And the institutions I'm going to start out with are big ones. Jacob's Pillow, just starting its season June 24th through August 30th, For those of you who don't know, it's just a wonderful farm that was purchased by Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Dennis way back in 1931. They started the Dennis Shawn Company, who went on to do Martha Graham and all the big Doris Humphrey. Just fabulous dance up in the Berkshires. So check it out, Jacob's Pillow, starting June 24th.
So world-class dance. I mean, world-class dance just within an hour of pretty much anyone living in the state of Connecticut.
Absolutely.
And so what else do you have for us?
This one I kind of love. It is also an institution. It is the Swedish Cottage Marionette Theater. And this is in Central Park. And it is this wonderful little Swedish cottage that was built way back in 1876. And it was supposed to be at the Philadelphia Centennial International Exhibition. And Frederick Law Olmsted went there, saw this beautiful little cottage, and he said, I have to have this. So he got the money from the government to build it, to take it apart and build it back in Central Park. And to this day, they do marionette shows there every summer. And this summer, Little Red Riding Hood is starting June 20th. And if I were a kid, I'd want to go. All right, I want to go to upstate New York, Hudson Valley and the Catskills, coming up June 25th through June 29th. It is a huge annual event that brings together all the artists in the Hudson Catskills area. And there are 160 participants, so you can go and get a map and go to all these different galleries. And it's really a high-powered event, and it celebrates all the creativity of that region.
So, and that's June 25th to June 29th. Mm-hmm. in the Hudson region.
And it's called the Upstate Art Weekend. So you can look that up.
And so is there any place else we should be going?
Absolutely. Let's go to the Norfolk Music Shed. Another one of these absolutely pristine buildings that was built in the 1880s by a wealthy Yale member who was interested in music, and his family went on to sponsor all these kind of concerts and build the Norfolk Music Shed as we know it today. And this is where all the Yale musicians go for the summer, and they have internships and programs and concerts at this beautiful, beautiful
So
space.
in the middle of no place, Norfolk, Connecticut, but it's sort of right sort of wedged between wealthy Litchfield and wealthy the Berkshires, and this is a place again for world-class music and a sort of historic venue.
Is there a type of music they play? Is it mostly classical?
It is classical, but it's also new contemporary composers. They have young musicians who are there for internships for the summer, and they give concerts. Some of the concerts are free and some are not, but you can bring a picnic on the lawn as well. There's all kinds of things going on, including, workshops and things like that.
And do you have one more event for us?
Oh, I do. Okay, another institution, Sturbridge Village. 4th of July at Sturbridge Village. I think that probably sums it up for itself.
It's not just 4th of July, but it is, let's face it, we have an anniversary for the country. So this is a historic museum and village where you can go and you can sort of experience a sort of beloved vision of America and Americana.
Yeah, there'll be poetry readings. Kids can make tricorn hats and, just have a blast up there. I think it would be a fun way to celebrate the 4th.
It's one of the great places in America to see sort of American history and architecture sort of come to life. That's it for this week's edition of CT Examiner Weekly. We'll be back next week with all our reporters at CT Examiner with all the news and with a look at how these stories play out from Hartford to your town. I'm Greg Stroud. The news is never done.
For more news and events, or if you want to send in comments or story ideas, please go to ctexaminer.com. And if you want to support our mission of keeping Connecticut informed of the news that matters, a subscription is just $20 for the entire year. Reporting and supporting what matters. This has been CT Examiner Weekly. Thanks for listening.